talking to Christine now. I met her on Facebook, and we were talking about a lot of serious stuff with what happened in Michigan over the weekend. How did you come across my reporting? You saw what I was posting on Facebook?
Well, I follow you, and I saw the post about the article, and I'd already been bothered by it. So I kind of was already probably had already posted myself a couple of times, but a couple different things with the incident that I had seen, and it bothered me, and so I reached out.
So we're talking about the Traverse City and over the weekend, right? And there's so much we learned about this. The guy that is accused of doing this, major mental health issues. His family, I read, tried getting him help. They couldn't, fell through the cracks. This is just one of so many stories I hear of in Michigan with mental health. And I went through it myself. I had a brother that went through a mental health crisis. He was addicted to drugs. He ended up passing away from drugs, but he didn't get the help he needed, really, and he wanted it. And you kind of have your own story that goes along, like, and you're not alone. There's thousands of others. How did that hit you? That because it struck a tone, right? What happened?
Yeah, so for two reasons. First of all, my mother was mentally ill. She passed away last November, and so she was involved with the court systems and the mental health system for many, many years, probably since I was, early teens. I'm 54 now. Long time ago. And she spent some time in Carroll Center for many years. Anyways, and she eventually was placed in AFC homes where she lived out her life. And then my brother, who would be 9 years younger than me, when he was about 25, he had his first mental health crisis, and he was not well. He was doing very erratic things, and my father ended up filing a petition with the court to have him evaluated, and they sent him to the hospital in Midland, where he was evaluated. He went from there to another facility. I don't recall the name of it, but I know it was downstate. I believe in Kalamazoo, maybe. And then he received some treatment there for quite some time. Then they put him in an AFC home for a little bit until he was kind of stabilized enough that they could return him to the community. And he did return home. And he actually had a couple of kids, I think at the time, possibly 3. I don't know if they've had their 3rd one yet or not. Okay. Lived at home with his girlfriend. He was under court-ordered mental health treatment, and he continued to live at home. They had med runners would come and bring his meds for him, pass his meds to ensure that he continued to take his meds. And then he had intensive treatment in the home, where like the therapist would come to the home, the treatment team, the nurse, whoever else, I don't even know who was all on the team, came to the home, provided him services for a period of time. And then at some point, I believe it was around 2009, he must have been discharged from the court-ordered jurisdiction.
So let me stop you. Sorry, it was everything going. Was during that treatment, were things going well? Was it doing good for him?
Yes, because they were giving him his meds. They were making sure that he took his meds. And I guess I should back up a little bit. My mom had the same history. She would get stable, she'd stop taking her meds. Get stable, stop taking her meds. And, my brother, he was involved with the legal system. He had a lot of legal issues even prior to his first mental health episode or break. And so he had a long history, legal history, which we know later that it was because of his mental health. He had substance abuse issues and alcohol as well, that went right along with that, which is typical often with mental health. People try to self-medicate rather than, taking the medications to help them. And anyways, he eventually, once he was no longer under court jurisdiction, he stopped taking his meds. And I'm going to say it was probably about 6 months before, about 6 months prior, he became unstable again. At one point he came to my house and he was angry with me and was yelling at me and was upset with me, did like a burnout in my yard and took off. And continued to be unstable for that 6-month period. He did still have mental health treatment. He had therapy, I know, and he also had his medications were still prescribed, although it was very clear that he probably was not taking them or not taking them how he should. And he was using some substances as well. As well. I don't know exactly, but I know he was. Then he, about 3 days, I'll just go to this. He ended up killing my father.
Oh my
February
Lord.
20th of 2010.
2000 February of 2010, he killed your father.
Yes.
Oh my God.
2 days prior to that, they had taken him to a mental health facility to ask, well, his girlfriend took him and asked them to evaluate him, explained that he had not slept for days, that he was talking erratically, he was, had hallucinations, he was not okay. And in her words at that time, they looked at him and asked him if he thought he needed help, and he told them no, and they let him walk away.
2 days before he killed his own father.
Yep.
Oh my
Yep.
God.
And it was a very gruesome, terrible death. And found my father laying in a pool of blood on the morning of, well, it would have been probably the afternoon of February 28th. So he did it. They believed that he did it that morning at some point. But because we know he was alive the night before, my sister had talked to him on the phone. And it was late in the evening. She was on a date with her now husband, but it was like one of their first dates.
Oh my.
And so anyways,
was he quickly arrested, or how?
Not immediately. So his girlfriend, who we know now, so we haven't had contact with her since he was arrested.
Okay.
She basically moved away right after, down to Florida. But she immediately took him to the hospital, told him, you need to admit yourself to the hospital. And he did. And he was there for a few days, 2-3 days, for an evaluation. And then they let him loose and sent him home.
Did it? So I don't want to interrupt, but did it not come up? I guess, did he not tell them what he did?
No, he did not.
Okay.
He did not, and neither did she.
Oh, and she knew.
She knew, and she, her parents hired her an attorney right away, and then she never interviewed with the police or anything after that, as far as I know.
Wow.
But anyways, she did know. She kept calling me that day. Normally I would call my dad a lot, almost every day. He was a diabetic. So I would call him every day. That morning I was busy. My kids had hockey. And so hockey games. So we went to the hockey games. When we were on our way to the hockey game, she called me and said, hey, have you talked to your dad today? I'm like, no, I haven't talked to him, but we're on our way to hockey. I'll call him later. So I believe on the way home, I tried to call him. He didn't answer. Called him again when I got home. He didn't answer. And so my son and I, my 10-year-old son at the time, and I jumped in my vehicle and we went over there, and that's when we found him.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
So at some point, did you know immediately? I mean, what you didn't know what had happened, but you know who? I mean, you had an idea of what maybe it was him or no?
So I didn't. So my sister I had not talked to my sister yet. I did not have I had no idea. I never would have suspected, honestly, that my brother would have done that, honestly. In fact, when the police finally did arrest him a few days later, I still said, you're wrong. There's no way. It wasn't him. And so I still didn't believe that it was him, until they told, they kind of shared a little bit more with me about what he told them, and, and that he did admit it. I knew he wasn't in his right state of mind. His girlfriend came to the scene when I found my dad, pretended like nothing was wrong.
Oh, geez.
I just had no idea.
Had he been violent ever in the past?
He had assaulted like a cousin at one point, but it was
Nothing like this, obviously.
No. And then, like I said, he I was like 9 years older than him, so he kind of looked at me more like a mother figure, than a, than a sibling.
Yeah.
Um, but and I kind of, I nurtured him as well. Like, we really didn't have a mom. As I said, my mom was mentally ill, so um, our mom was just not there for us emotionally, or so, she just wasn't. And
Yeah.
anyway, so we were pretty close, and I never in a million years thought that he would do anything like that. I never thought that he would, I never felt threatened by him in any way. Um,
Okay.
really. I mean, yes, that day that it made me very, very uncomfortable when he started screaming at me, and then he, did what he did. He burned out in my yard, and I was like, oh man, but I still would have never thought that he would have done something like that. Um,
So was there a trial, and how that, what was the outcome of
oh,
I mean, did he plead insanity, or what happened with that all?
So they actually sent him down to the forensic center eventually. So they arrested him. He was erratic in jail. They ended up sending him down to the forensic center down in Ann Arbor or Ypsilanti, and
Yep.
where he was there for several months until they got him to where he could be um, lucid enough or sane enough to be able to stand trial. But he
Okay.
did with a plea deal, and he did plea. He was sentenced to 25 to 50 years in prison. So he's served about 15 years at this point. He has, I used to talk to him by phone up until about 2020, and I stopped at that point. He's had a lot of mental breaks even while he's been in the hospital, or I mean in the prison. Um, and then so that I just only communicated by email. I continue to communicate with him, mostly out of fear. And I do feel sorry for him somewhat, but I am afraid of him. And he would started, he sends very erratic emails. He has been for months now. Probably, like I said, my mother passed away in November. When she passed away, he definitely had a mental break after that, which I expected, to be honest,
Yeah.
because he was the only person that supported him. She talked to him on the phone all the time. She would send him money. Um, so he was kind of like her only, you know, emotional and financial support. And so when she passed away, I knew he was going to have a hard time, but he has not been stable since then. He sends erratic emails. Finally, and he starts to get, when he gets like that, he gets also mean to me and will get accusatory and say things, just say mean things. And so I finally, a couple of months ago, just said, I'm not going to have contact anymore. I'm not going to allow you to talk to me this way anymore. I'm afraid. I let him know that. I said, I never want you to come to, don't ever come to my home. And I cut contact off at that point. So I have
So,
not, he still sends emails.
and
Um,
he's still in prison right now.
yes, he is in prison. Yep. But he's out
Okay.
parole in like 2035. So like another 10 years or yeah, another 10 years. I'm
Okay. So it sounds like he may not be getting the mental help he needs in prison, it sounds like.
Well, obviously, I mean, so I did reach out to the prison, and I left them a voicemail because nobody answered, and nobody ever called me back to say, you need to check his emails. He's not stable. He's not okay. If they read his emails, which I know they monitor stuff, I don't know how they couldn't know. He talks about being God and in that he's the heir to the throne and all this stuff. It's very clear that he's not stable. And like I said, and I left a voicemail letting them know that he's not stable. And after that, he still sends emails that are not normal. So
Could could what happened to your father have been prevented?
yes, yes, yeah. If he would have never been discharged from the court-ordered treatment, where somebody was actually passing his medications and monitoring his medications to ensure that he was taking them properly. And I think with somebody who is that mentally unstable, and because he did have periods of stability and then instability, actually several times over that few year period, that he did get treatment. So he did struggle, even on medications, to stay stable. But then at some point he was stable for a period of time, and they ended the court jurisdiction. Um,
So
with,
he was getting help, but then they cut him off. I don't know how tight you were with him at the time, but was it obvious when they stopped the treatment that it probably was a bad decision when that happened?
so at the time, not necessarily, because he was stable and he was taking his meds still. But then slowly, you know, over maybe a month or so, he stopped taking the meds, and he would say like he didn't like how the meds made him feel. They kind of like dulled his personality. Like he just, he didn't feel good on it. And
Yeah.
so common with those with mental illness, they get to a point where they, where they're doing good and they're stable, and they'll just stop taking their meds, and it's very common.
So is in this case, I mean, should there have been more of a monitoring going on? I mean, it sounds like it just didn't have to happen. They should have maybe there should have been like a follow up after they got him off. I don't know how it works. It sounds like it didn't have to happen.
Right, exactly. No, well, and it didn't. Like I said, on that Friday, his girlfriend took him and said he's not been sleeping. He's talking
Yeah.
erratic.
Oh, yeah. You said two days
2 days.
before, right?
So yes, it could have been prevented, and whoever it was that evaluated him that day made the wrong decision.
Wow. And you dealt mental health and prayers to you and your family, but your mom, you dealt with mental health as well. And when you heard this story out of Traverse City, and I thought there's got to be a mental health issue here. And it turns out this man in Traverse City has extreme mental health issues and apparently passed through the system. And I'm hearing a lot of stories from so many people about similar things, but you don't hear a lot in the news about the mental health problems, how bad it is in Michigan and across the country. But what's your whole take on that? That should be a big priority, shouldn't it be?
Yeah, absolutely. So we know, and if you remember, like back in 2020, there was a mental health crisis, and
Oh
especially
yeah,
with children, there wasn't enough beds. There was, I mean, I remember the guy, I think it was in Elma, a child was spent days in the hospital while they were waiting for a bed for him. That was an indicator that we have a mental health crisis here in Michigan. And I know the state of Michigan for the last several years has cut funding for the mental health system. That cannot happen. we, we what is happening is the court systems are passing the buck on to CMH or the community mental health system, whatever it's called in your community, and then the mental health system is putting these people, like if they're severe, they are putting them like in a state hospital. There's only 2 state hospitals in the state of Michigan.
that's
There are
ridiculous.
beds for those that are severely mentally ill that have committed violent crimes, and so they're putting these people in prisons because they have nowhere else to put them, or they're putting them in the mental hospital for a period of time, like they did with my mom. She also was in for not guilty, but for reason of insanity. I believe she tried to kidnap a child, is how she ended up there, if I remember correctly. Well, I know she did. I don't know if that's the reason that she got there.
Wow.
And eventually they got her stabilized enough to return her to the community. She was never violent after that. She would stop taking her meds. And so, she eventually was placed in an AFC home where she lived out the rest of her life so that they could ensure that she took her meds.
Many, when I cover the news, I worked in it for 25 years, and you hear as soon as something big happens, there was a shooting in New York the other day, even a stabbing or whatever. You always hear about, it's about the gun, it's about the knife. You don't hear the lawmakers speak up. Sometimes you do about mental health. It's always, it's gun, and there is gun violence, absolutely. But should there be more of a say on mental health? And I know the guns are part of it, or the knife's part of it, but the mental health has to be a big issue, right?
I mean, the lawmakers and the politicians should all be screaming at the rooftops right now. That is a perfect example of what happened in Traverse City as to why we need more in our more mental health in our mental health system. We need more treatment options. We need more beds. We need more providers. There's a crisis. There's there's a revolving door with workers in that those job roles, because it is a high stress job and there's not enough to go around. So they have large caseloads. And I think that's also probably why sometimes people get pushed through, because they just don't have enough workers to provide the services.
Yeah, because if that man you could hide all the knives you want from him, but if he is still mentally ill, he's going to find a knife. He's going to commit the crime. So it sounds like the root cause is the mental illness.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. And you're not, I mean, you're speaking up to me and you're very brave to do so, but you're not alone. I mean, you're one of probably thousands that are going through this. I talked to a family a year ago of a young kid. He was 14 years old. They had to drain their life savings to get mental health help out of state because there wasn't any in Michigan. So you're not alone. I mean, dealing with all of this.
Yeah. I've heard of stories like that. Yep. Where they couldn't find a bed here and they had to go Wisconsin. I know of a story. So yeah, I mean, we've got to do more. Our governor, our lawmakers, our politicians, they've got to do something. We've got to do more. We have to have adequate funding in our system. We have to have adequate resources. We need enough psychiatrists to provide the mental health treatment. We need enough therapists to provide. I mean, they're all overworked, and there's just not enough funding to fund these programs, and it's way too important for the health of the individuals with the mental health crises and the society as a whole. We've got to do better. We have to do better.
Yeah, and it starts when they're young, and obviously COVID messed up a lot of kids. So, yeah, I mean that's a whole thing. So hopefully, you speaking out may. I know some lawmakers watch what I put out there, so hopefully it'll strike a tone, and they'll realize because over and over again, I remember covering so many crimes. It's mental illness is at the root of it. I mean, the person's still responsible, obviously, for what they did. But in this instance, for example, with your brother, 2 days before he killed your dad, he could have it could have been stopped. He could have been, they could have held him, something could have happened. And that's how sad, because 2 days before he was being checked out for mental health issues.
Yes, absolutely.
Wow. Well, I pray for all of you, and hopefully you speaking up will make a difference. I got a lot of people following me, and if more people continue to speak up, and we don't need any more violence or crimes, but to focus on when they do happen, like this in Traverse City,
Yeah.
mental health. I know the family of this man spoke out that they tried to get him help, and I'm glad they did. They spoke out. So hopefully more people, hopefully it'll make a difference because we elect all of these people. They should be working for us.
Yeah, yeah. Let me say one more thing too. So like with my brother, he's in prison. He's obviously not mentally stable. So my
Yeah.
fear is 10 years from now, what is going to happen? There should be some type of step down program for people getting out of prison, that they're not just set out in the community. They should be, especially a violent crime like what he did. I mean, he used a knife to kill my father. And it wasn't just one spot in his body. It was, at least a couple.
Yeah.
That is a very gruesome, violent act. And he should never be allowed to have the opportunity to do something like that again.
Yeah, and I don't know how it works, and I don't know in the state of Michigan. Once you serve your time,
I am listed as a victim of his crime, and I will, I will speak out against him being paroled at 25 years, and I hope that I'm successful in ensuring that he stays there longer. Unfortunately, because I think the only other option is they'll let him walk free. I want to say too, I know like last year there was legislation out there about trying to release these prisoners early. And he actually was thinking that he would be one of them if it passed. And I was like, are you kidding me? Like, so I don't know if the lawmakers are still working on that. I looked it up last night. I was trying to find the information. The only thing I can find is for 2024. I don't know if it ever passed or not, or how it was, I pray it wasn't passed. If it was, it includes violence.
Yeah, I don't think so. I know the one thing they are doing, if you're anyone who was convicted of even a serious crime, even murder, 19 years and younger, they're wanting to possibly all of them, possibly let some of them out. But it sounds like things need to be taken on a case-by-case basis. You can't just paint a broad brush.
Right. Absolutely. And the violent crimes, they have to look at them differently. And if they can't, they need to change the laws, because a violent crimes have got to be looked at differently. Same thing. So, the guy in Traverse City, I read that he did commit like something like mutilated dead bodies or something.
Yep.
They're in the mid 2000s at some point. Why was he out in society to do something like this? Why?
Yeah, it happens over and over again, and wow.
And it's
Well,
he, you know, he didn't get the treatment that he needed. I mean, I feel bad. Like I said, I feel bad for my brother too. Um, I do sympathize, but when you commit a violent crime, it has to be looked at differently, so that the person never has the opportunity to do something like that again. It, it's especially when it comes to mental illness, because when they're having a mental break, you don't, how do you know that it's not going to happen again? You don't.
no, no, and then yeah, the next time it could, yeah, it's just I've reported too many of those incidents. So, um, well, hopefully this makes a difference. I know, like I said, lawmakers watch what I'm doing. Prayers to you and your
Thank you.
brother as well, and that just I appreciate you speaking out. Hopefully, it'll help.
Thank you. I appreciate it.